Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. What a glorious day. What a glorious day it is because we've got so many things going on today. I'm Sean Stiers and I'm joined by Jesse Stiers. We have got something that people have been clamoring for, people have been calling for, people have been standing on the rooftops wanting for months and months and months. We haven't had it in such a long time. It's the whiteboard, the return of the whiteboard on today's Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with irishbreakdown.com. Now, for all the radio listeners on WSBT and everywhere else, you're like, what's the whiteboard? We haven't experienced this before. Well, you will experience it in a matter of minutes. It is coming your way on today's show. Jesse will deliver it. How fired up are you, Jesse Stiers, for Whiteboard Edition #1 this season?
I'm really fired up. This is a really important week for Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. I think they got to correct a lot of things. But I watched that Texas A&M and Utah State game when I was studying a good amount of Texas A&M defense.
Yep.
I don't understand Utah State. They were begging, Texas A&M was begging them to run the ball, absolutely begging them to run the ball. I don't think the same situation is going to hold true for Notre Dame. But we'll definitely get into that.
All right.
The hardest part about the whole whiteboard thing is it's a lot of fun, but there's also a lot of nerve. I feel like having to explain it.
Got to make sure you got it right. That's right. Yeah,
got to have it extra good for the radio audience because now I have to paint that picture. It's no longer just the live YouTube show. So, as they say, great power comes great responsibility.
That's true. Got to use you'll have to use the play-by-play osmosis to help in your descriptions. So, all right, so we've got that coming up in just a little bit. We're going to start with something else new today. Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down. And what this is going to be is our weekly check-in. It's a stock up, stock down segment after Notre Dame football games. Didn't do it last week, kind of saving it to this week to get into the flow of the season. Finally, we had the Marcus Freeman press conference yesterday, and so now it's Tuesday. There'll be, and by the way, there's going to be multiple whiteboard this week, just in case anyone is, wondering about that. But it's Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down. And, we know how everyone's feeling about the offensive line and the defense for Notre Dame. But I was thinking about this after watching that Bills-Ravens game the other night, Jess. I started thinking, if Notre Dame had actually come back to beat Miami, would any of those things seem as bad, as they have seemed for the last week, or would winning have essentially glossed over everything and made people forget about some of those ailments?
Yeah, I think winning wipes away a lot of the bad taste that can be, in people's mouths after a game, and it definitely allows it to not linger as long. But even if they came back and won that game, you throw on the tape and kind of see some of the first half struggles still with the offense and the lack of physicality of the defense and kind of, the offensive line with some blown assignments and just bad technique overall. Those things are glaring. I don't think that you would just overlook those things just because you won. It makes you feel better, right? It's not as much doomsday or we got to blow this thing up or Chris Ash stinks. What are we doing here? None of that would be said out loud. But you would still have some, concerns.
Because here's my example. Derrick Henry for the Ravens averaged almost 9.5 yards per carry
in an
NFL game against the Buffalo Bills, a team a lot of people are now picking as the AFC favorites. Even going into that game, a lot of people had them as the AFC favorites. Derrick Henry had almost 170 yards, almost 9.5 yards per carry against Buffalo. Do you think Bills fans are killing their run defense right now, just because, Derrick Henry gashed them? No, they won. I've got to, and they won by 1 point, literally the slimmest of margins. I can't believe that they're obsessing over, how bad the run defense was the other night. But so apply that to the Notre Dame Miami game. And I'm not saying that anything is less an issue. I'm just saying you'd be feeling differently about it if Notre Dame had actually won that game, because The Irish held Miami to 3.1 yards per carry, 119 total rushing yards in that game. And Notre Dame fans have been saying, well, Mario Cristobal, he got conservative and, that brought the yards per carry down and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? I write down the stats at halftime all the time, like all the yardage stats and the whole thing. Miami averaged 3.1 yards per carry on 16 carries in the first half. In the second half, 3.1 yards per carry on 22 carries, only 6 more carries, the exact same yards per carry, half and a half, but everyone's, trying to downplay the fact that Notre Dame did a pretty good job in spite of some tackling issues and things like that against the run against the Hurricanes.
Yeah, and it's funny how averages work, because that's the whole usual reason for average is it's going to average out in the end. But it wasn't the run defense that beat Notre Dame. It was just a couple talented throws by Carson Beck, and really schematically just not dialing up enough pressure, knowing how experienced and how savvy Carson Beck is as a thrower of the ball. Like, he's going to find someone if you give him 4, 5, 6 second pockets back there. Like, it's just the laws of football. You can't guard someone forever unless you get a sack or they throw the ball incomplete. So I think that was, in my eyes, the overarching issue was not even really the pass defense, but just the lack of pressure and allowing Beck to kind of sit back there and eventually find something that's open.
Okay, we're going to get into some, again, some offensive stuff with the Irish in a little bit with the whiteboard segment. Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down, though, our new Tuesday segment. Where's Marcus Freeman's stock after the season opening loss to Miami?
So I'm not going to do any of this neutral BS. I'm either going to go up or down. I'm not going to, I'm not going to straddle the line or tiptoe around anything today.
I like it.
I have to go Shamrock Up. And I know it's hard to say after a loss to be up, but the reason why I say Shamrock Up is just the way that Marcus Freeman kind of handled, how he addressed the team afterwards, and knowing that this is a huge bounce back week for them. And so I think I'll have a better, more clear picture, obviously, after this Texas A&M game, but I can't just quit on my coach after one tough loss to open the season against a really good team on the road. So I'm always going to believe in Marcus Freeman. I think this Texas A&M week, I could lead to maybe some stock down if you have back-to-back weeks with a lot of the same issues that you said you were going to fix. But again, I like the way that he handles losses. There's never excuses or throwing blame on players. We know we need to be better. Here's what we're going to work on. It's like he almost speaks things into existence. And I think that goes a long way with his team and his players is the more he says it out loud of this is what we're going to fix. This is how we're going to do it. I think the players just naturally grab onto that and buy into it. So I think he's a tremendous coach. And so I have to be stock up.
Yeah. See, this is where I have to agree with Facilitate on this in the YouTube chat. He says, I believe in Free though, but the stock is down on him amongst the base. I agree with that because of the things. Look, he's the head coach, and as the head coach, as I always say, your name goes on the marquee next to, the program. It is Marcus Freeman's Notre Dame football right now, and I will agree with you. I always like the way he responds and reacts, and it he finds a way to push the right buttons. The other side of that is, okay, do we always need to have to find, like that response, to these negative things? Again, fully acknowledging that this was a top 10 team that they went on the road to play to open up the season. A lot of other, people are playing some cupcakes out there to open up the season, and that's not what Notre Dame got. But I do think you have to say slightly down, especially because of what we saw from the defense. New defensive coordinator, there is going to be some adjustment period, but at the same time, the standard is the standard, and the standard of the defense is up here. But at least for that game, there were issues obviously on the offensive side, but I think on the defensive side, some of those got corrected to an extent over the course of the game. And again, kind of going back to what I was talking about with the, how your perspective would look differently. At the rushing totals as an example. And I agree with what Bobby is saying. Notre Dame should never be outplayed. And that was the biggest issue, I think, in that game. So Marcus Freeman stock for me slightly down. It's not a big dip. A lot of it's going to be judged and based on what the response is this Saturday, though, against Texas A&M.
And I know we're playing a huge hypothetical here, but let's say, Notre Dame's 11-1, 10-2 to end the season. Miami's 11-1, 12-0 ACC champ, going to the college football playoff. Would that change kind of your perspective about the outcome of this first game? And, I know that there were struggles and those have been highlighted, but again, I come back to, okay, what if you potentially played a playoff team on the road, opening game of the season, new defensive coordinator, new ensemble of offensive line, new quarterback, and that's how the game went. I get it. Like, there's certain things you never want to feel like you got outplayed or out-physicaled, like the stuff that you can overarchingly control as a coach. And I think maybe that's the frustrating part, is the things that they could control more of, they didn't, and that's what we're so accustomed to seeing. But Marcus Freeman has never lost back-to-back games as a Notre Dame head coach. It's never happened in his tenure. You could technically say Oklahoma State and then Ohio State to open the season, but I'm not going to count that. As a head coach, regular season, he's never lost back-to-back games. And the way that he responds to some of those ugly losses like NIU, Marshall, Stanford is usually pretty good. And so given the track record of who he is, how he's handled or addressing this situation. And again, I don't even really see it as a situation because of the talent on Miami. I think these things are going to be fine. And I think Miami was just a really good team, and Notre Dame.
I think you missed a couple games because he actually lost to Oklahoma State, then Ohio State, and then Marshall, to Tommy's point. He actually has lost back-to-back games in his Notre Dame.
They started that season 0-2?
They did. Lost to Ohio State and then came home and lost to Marshall. But obviously they got things rolling after that. But that's the only time that he's lost back-to-back games, was in that stretch. But that's okay.
Overlooked.
It's all right. I had forgotten about it too, because it's almost ancient history at this point. But it did happen. Is there anyone whose stock you think rose after the Miami game for Notre Dame? I've got a couple candidates. I'm curious to see what you say first, though.
I will definitely say, I think the easiest and most obvious one is CJ Carr. I think his stock definitely rose. There was a lot of questions around it. I think nationally his stock rose too. You hear a lot of people in the national media really speak highly of him. I know Raritan had some drops, but I think his stock is also up as a guy who can be legit in the passing game. So that really takes care of it for me on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you could also say, Micah Gilbert's stock rose a little bit because he had some on-field production. Obviously, caught the touchdown. I think he had at least another catch or two. So offensively, that's where I'm at. Defensively,
Gilbert, by the way, is my guy. Like, he's one of the ones that I thought of offensively whose stock is up, and I agree with like first career touchdown catch. He looked good. He looked like a guy that we've kind of been waiting a little bit to see, and we finally got to see it. He's 100% healthy. Got his first career touchdown pass. I think Swandong is right. Jordan Faison. He was the most consistent aspect of Notre Dame's offense outside of CJ Carr, don't you think?
I mean, he caught a couple passes.
It's not that his stock was low, but at least it's a little he was more.
But I've seen that out of him before. Right? I've seen that out of him before.
Right.
That's the thing, is he didn't do anything I haven't seen him do before. I didn't see him hit like a crazy, streak down the field. He made some short intermediate catches, made a couple guys miss and got some extra yards after the catch. Like, that's his game. He reminds me a lot of Golden Tate in the way that he kind of can move after the catch. I want to see more downfield from him. And so, again,
yeah, but we want to see
well
that in general from the offense, right? Not just him.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, that was just basically going to be kind of where I leave it with Faison is I've seen that kind of stuff before out of him.
Okay. So what about defensively? Anyone bump up for you?
Really, this one was a little bit tougher. I thought Jared Dawson actually was a guy whose stock went up. Obviously was a transfer guy. I thought he was really good in the run game. You talked about the 3.1 yards per carry. I thought Notre Dame's interior defensive line actually did a relatively good job. And it was largely led by Jared Dawson, I want to say. So I would say his stock is up. I mean, you could potentially say Boubacar Traore, but again, he was kind of playing at a pretty good level before the injury last year. And so, for me, it's just more or less kind of want to make sure that he's coming back and can consistently play at that level. It's
I agree
really outside of that. I can't really say anyone in the secondary or the linebackers, their stock went up.
Yeah, I won't say Jalen Stroman. Swandong is suggesting him. I'm not saying Stroman had a bad night. Overall, he had a pretty good night, but there was one particular pass play when, like you've got a veteran like Stroman and he was one-on-one with Malachi Toney and, Toney beat him on the play. And, it's like when you're a veteran going up against a true freshman like that, you expect to be able to, to win those battles basically, but didn't happen one-on-one. Again, I'm not knocking him big time. I'm just saying needed to see a little bit more. Toney was a matchup problem for a lot of different guys. I'd go Kingston Viliamu-Asa though.
Yeah. I was struggling with him. I thought he still isn't really sound in the run defense, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think he's great off the edge and in some kind of natural pass rushing situations or setting the end of the line of scrimmage, right? Like kind of maintaining the edge. And if they break outside, he obviously has the speed and athleticism to catch up and kind of chase him out of bounds. But playing a pure Mike linebacker, inside linebacker, I still think he struggles with the run reads.
We got to hit a couple more here, and then before we take our break and then come back with some whiteboard. Whose stock took the biggest hit? To me, it's either Emil Wagner or Joe Rudolph. I think I know a lot of people are talking about Knapp, but how high was Knapp's stock to begin with? I think Emil Wagner had very high stock. Really rough night going up against Bain most of the night, and obviously Joe Rudolph has taken a beating since that game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that Emil Wagner took the biggest hit offensively, but I kind of want to transition defensively. Thought Drake Bowen's stock went down a little bit. I thought there was a lot of hype around him, considering he is a captain, preseason All-American, coming off the season he had last year. I didn't think he lived up to it in game one. I didn't think he took the next step going into this season. I didn't see any progression out of him. So while I'm not saying his stock is crashing, I do think it took a bit of a hit, knowing the kind of expectations that everyone had for him. And again, knowing also what's in that linebacker room. There's a lot of really talented linebackers in that room. So if Drone is on the field, he needs to be a dude.
Yeah. As Michael says, 4 missed tackles for Bowen against Miami, 5 missed total all of last season. Not his best night by any means. Whose stock is the highest right now?
I mean, I just feel like I have to go with Jeremiyah Love.
That's my answer as well.
He's still the most talented player on the field. And if you want to go defensively, I would say Leonard Moore, because he also had a really solid game. And again, you look offensively and defensively, who are the studs? Leonard Moore, Jeremiyah Love. I don't think that they did anything detrimental to the team. Jeremiyah Love obviously can't control where the play calling is going. Would you have liked him to, been a little bit more productive in his carries? Sure. But Leonard Moore had a really good game. And to be honest, right now, I think Christian Gray too. I thought Christian Gray played a really solid game for the most part as well. And I'm not saying his stock is the highest or above Leonard Moore, but I still
Well,
feel like
that's what the question is. So you don't need to rattle off half the defense.
Leonard Moore, Jeremiyah Love.
I would definitely go with Jeremiyah Love. He obviously didn't get the opportunities to do his thing. Leonard Moore didn't have a horrible night, but at the same time, like how much do you hold the CJ Daniels touchdown pass against him?
I mean, he knows he has someone over top. He's playing the underneath route.
That's true. That's true. It's fair.
So of course he's going to bite on that to start.
Yeah.
I
mean, he was there in coverage. It's just that.
I mean, that's on Schuler.
Yeah.
I mean, Leonard Moore took everything underneath the over the top stuff. That was all Don Schuler. Even though he bit on it, he still did recover and make Beck throw that ball high and a ball that Schuler should have intercepted.
Yeah. We're asking whose stock is up after the Miami game. Joe says Al Golden. That's a fair point. Plus he won on Sunday as well against Cleveland. Outbound in the YouTube chat says, I've seen some people say they think CJ was trying to outshine Love, and that is why he threw almost all the RPOs.
That'd be a stupid strategy as a first-time quarterback.
First-time starting quarterback.
I just think he's
not Caleb Williams, man. Like that's not his vibe,
And if Miami's smart, and they were taking away the run option first. They wanted CJ Carr to make those throws. So that's the reads they were giving him. A lot of it is the read. It's not preference. It's what you're taught to read.
Whiteboard is next. We're going to take a timeout at Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down. First segment. We'll be doing it every Tuesday throughout the season. Whose stock is up? Whose stock is down for Notre Dame? We're also going to be doing Whiteboard every Tuesday throughout the season. And today's Whiteboard will cover some of those RPOs and some of the offense as well, and how they can get Jeremiyah Love and or Jadarian Price going in the run game against the Texas A&M Aggies this Saturday. That's coming up next. Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. We did a little Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down in segment 1 of the show. Now is what you've all been waiting for.
Oh,
right? The whiteboard cometh to today's show. We're going to break out the whiteboard for the first time this season. We're going to talk a little Notre Dame offense with this. Before we do that, I'm going to play this cut from Marcus Freeman, because Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price, of course, combined for 16 carries against the Miami Hurricanes. They gave C.J. Carr a lot of RPOs. He had 30 pass attempts in the game. Yes, there were times when Carr should have handed off, but he did throw. He is still a first-time starting quarterback, so he didn't make every read perfectly. By and large, he did a pretty good job, it seemed like. But Marcus Freeman talked at his press conference yesterday about balancing the correct read on RPOs and also making sure Love and Price get the ball when Texas A&M loads up and brings 8 men in the box Saturday night, which is sure to happen.
There's RPOs that you're reading the defender. Like if they're putting 8 men in the box, we got to throw it out to really take advantage of the numbers. But then there's some times that it's a little bit gray, and we got to be very clear with our quarterbacks. If it's gray, what do we want them to do? Right? Do we want them to hand it off? Do we want them to throw it? And so we were very intentional about trying to put the ball in Jay Love's hands or making him the primary target. And some of those included RPOs where we've talked as a coaching staff. Is there times that we got to take out the read, right, and be able to say, hey, this is what we want to do, hand the ball off here, or hey, let's continue to throw it out if they're going to bring the extra guy in the box. But we know we want to focalize our offense around Jay Love. He's a special player. But at the same point, we got to make sure that we're taking advantage of what each defense is trying to do to us.
All right, got to take advantage of what the defense is trying to do to you, but also have to find a way to get the ball in Jeremiyah Love's hands. That is the balancing act that they have to make with this offense with a quarterback, C.J. Carr, who'll be making his second start. So any thoughts first on what you heard there from Marcus Freeman?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, a lot of what we're going to get into to begin with is kind of understanding what he was talking about. It's a numbers game. If you have 8 guys in the box, that screams pass. If you got 6 to 7, that's when it kind of gets to that gray area that he was talking about. But the whole point of an RPO is you're isolating one player and you're trying to read off of them. They give you one read, you throw it. If they give you another read, you hand it off. But the whole point of the RPO is there's always an answer, and that's why you isolate and read one guy. He's going to give you an answer. So it's really just a numbers game, and it's interesting to see because Texas, like I was kind of alluding to at the beginning of the show, Texas A&M, depending on kind of the looks that Utah State was giving them, didn't necessarily overload the box. They didn't really commit 8 guys to the box.
It might be simple. It might be because Utah State does not have a Jeremiyah Love or Jadarian Price.
Right. But I think it's somewhere kind of in the middle. I don't think that they're just going to completely, come unglued for who they are as an offense, altogether.
They really didn't, with the exception of a few plays. Texas A&M didn't just overwhelm Utah State. I felt at the line.
No, and that's the thing. At the beginning of the game, it was really a solid game, and then kind of towards the middle, Texas A&M started to get out in front. Miami, just like Miami, Texas A&M has a stud off the edge who's going to line up across from Knapp, and I think he's going to have his hands full. Someone that's a huge matchup overall in this game, because when Texas A&M was effective on defense, it was when that guy was getting pressure. But my thing is, and we'll kind of get into this too, I really feel like Notre Dame needs to spread them out in order to run the ball, and that's what they did on that drive where Jadarian Price ran the ball. Is they kind of emptied out the box on their own by just spreading everything out and then allowing Jadarian Price to kind of go in there and run the ball.
This is what we used to talk about a lot when Notre Dame was still running so much 12 personnel heavy stuff. And
you're just inviting players to the box.
You're just bringing players into the box by doing that. Now, Notre Dame did play more 11 personnel against Miami Sunday, and obviously we saw some 20 and 21 as well, most of that in the first half. But bring up your whiteboard. Let's not waste any more time. We've only got so much time to do this, so let's get your whiteboard out and see what you've got for us today. How are we going to draw this up?
Yeah, there's a good amount of screens, so give me a second here.
Oh, we've got multiple screens, or is this just for you, multiple screens?
No, there's multiple. Well, one screen at a time, but I have a lot of screens is what I'm trying to get at.
All right. Trying to brag?
Can you bring that in? I think I have hit the present button.
There it is. I didn't see it at first. All right. So we're going to put this up. This is up, of course. If you're listening on the radio, you cannot see this, but if you were watching on the live YouTube stream at either Irish Breakdown's YouTube channel or the Sports Radio WSBT YouTube channel, you can see it. So what we are looking at here as Jesse moves around some safeties and linebacker types right now is Notre Dame, it looks like, is sitting in 11 personnel with C.J. Carr, the quarterback, in the shotgun formation, and the running back, regardless of who it is, offset to his right. We've got a tight end on a wing to the right side as well. We've got twins to the right side of the formation and one receiver over to the left side of the formation. So that's what things look like. Where are we going from here, big dog?
Yeah, so thank you for the intro.
Sure.
You really painted that picture. So, basically, and this is the look that Texas A&M, so this is how you have to kind of analyze these type of situations. You have to identify formations and sets that Notre Dame is going to run and that showed up on tape against Texas A&M. So this is a set that Utah State got into against Texas A&M. So we know when Notre Dame wants to run the ball, and even when they want to pass the ball, like they're in a lot of 11 personnel. There's usually at least one tight end and one running back on the field at all times, right? And so this is a common formation that you found kind of when watching both of these teams. So what Marcus Freeman is alluding to, right now you have 7 players in the box, between 4 down linemen and 3 linebackers. The outside linebacker to the field side where there's the tight end and the 2 wide receivers, this is the read guy. This is the guy in an RPO situation that you're ultimately going to read, right? And so
he's talking about a linebacker that is set off there to the strength side, the tight end side.
Yeah, the tight end and the 2 wide receiver side. So Notre Dame right now has 6 players in the box, and obviously the running back. So it makes 7 players in the box. Right now, Miami's kind of got 6 to 7 as well in the box. So you would say numbers are pretty even. This is that gray area that Marcus Freeman is talking about because it's even. You have to make the read and decide, what's going to happen. So on the snap of the ball, what's going to happen is the quarterback is going to take the ball and ride this mesh point with the running back. As he's riding that mesh point, he's watching this outside linebacker. If this outside linebacker crashes and tries to set the edge, he is likely not going to hand this ball off to Jeremiyah Love. And what he's going to do then is look for his tight end to kind of leak out behind this linebacker, or maybe not even the tight end. Maybe it's the slot, coming down on some sort of screen, and the tight end is setting the edge against this linebacker. So as soon as the slot catches, he can catch the ball and cut up field. But, that's if that linebacker really plays the run and kind of steps down, right? The reverse of that is, let's say on the run, that linebacker isn't biting and he's kind of just hanging out here, not really committing, right? Maybe he takes a step or two, but he's not committing. At that point is when you want to hand the ball off and you feel like you have numbers to the running back. So that's, again, kind of the overall schematics of how the RPO works, or who the read man is ultimately going to be. So
who C.J. Carr is reading, right?
Yeah, who C.J. Carr is reading. So, if I'm Notre Dame in this situation, I think the biggest thing that you have to experiment is with what we were just kind of talking about is I don't like necessarily in a situation where you have Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price. I'm not a huge fan of inviting players to the box. And so if I'm Mike Denbrock this week, I think what I'm experimenting with the most, or the things I'm kind of looking at, is how can we displace our tight end? Because if you displace the tight end, everyone now has to kick out. This linebacker has to kind of play over here. This linebacker is out over here. So even though it seems like minimal, these linebackers all have to take at least 2, 3, 4 steps to this now, trip side, because the tight end is displaced, right? And so that gives you a more open box, right? And so what you can do now is, let's say with this displaced tight end, we quickly motion down, we get him on the box, and then on the snap of the ball, we're kicking out and we're handing this ball off to our running back, and we're just going, he's now got a lead blocker kind of going through the hole, right? And so that's an RPO look that I'd like to see is, okay, you motion down your tight end that's displaced. On the snap of the ball, you find this mesh point. If you like what you see, you hand it off. If not, this tight end can kind of leak out into the flat, and here's Eli Raritan with a nice, easy 3 to 4 yard gain. Or maybe it's this wide receiver who's running maybe like a 5-yard curl route. Just something quick where now you've had your tight end displaced, so you get your numbers outside of the box. You bring him in motion on the snap of the ball. He's now back in the box. You have the linebackers trying to adjust within the box, to this tight end motioning across. Boom, you hand the ball off. Everyone's like, what's going on? Tight end's either the lead blocker through the hole, or he can slip out and catch a ball into the flat.
All right, we're doing some whiteboard, looking at Notre Dame's offense and how Notre Dame can get Jeremiyah Love and or Jadarian Price involved in this offense more, get that running game going, that vaunted running game that they came into the season with that didn't get going against Miami. Okay, let's do one more before we take a break, and then we'll be able to do some more after the break as well.
All right. Let me undo some stuff real quick.
This is where Jesse has to clear off his whiteboard now and get all of his John Madden markings and arrows and circles and dings and doinks and all that kind of stuff out of there. Okay, so for this, I kind of want to start in a traditional 2x2 set, but it should be noted that right now, yes, they're in 2x2, but I need to point out that it's still 11 personnel. You still have Eli Raritan as the field, or the wide receiver closest to the line of scrimmage. Going to be important on this play. I think this is, again, what did we talk about on the last play? Getting your tight end displaced, right? Because what that's going to do is, if Texas A&M goes 4 down lineman as a base every time, they basically run some sort of like 4-2-5 essentially, right? So you go 2x2, this linebacker has to be a little bit displaced. This linebacker has to be displaced. Really what you call it is splitting the edge. So the end man of the line of scrimmage, your defensive lineman, and then that first wide receiver, this linebacker is likely going to split the difference there. And the reason why they want to do that is, as soon as this linebacker comes out, this wide receiver comes out, you want this linebacker to get hands on this guy immediately. He's going to jam him. Same thing holds true on this side. They're going to jam. So again, we're displacing the box. We're going 2x2. We're spreading this thing out a little bit, but we still have intentions to run the ball here. So let's say at the snap of the ball, CJ Carr takes it. Immediately he can either hand this ball off and hope that, Jeremiyah Love against predominantly you got 5 offensive linemen against probably 4 defensemen, maybe 5 defensemen, based off of, again, what this read side linebacker does. Let's say he's really worried about pass. He doesn't want to get burned, so he's kind of flying out or leaning towards the wide receiver side. Okay, we hand this ball off, and we let kind of Jeremiyah Love go on some sort of veer concept here. Where I think this play can get really fun is, let's say, again, that tight end is displaced, but we motion him across the play. We let him clear the center. Boom. Now we snap the ball. Immediately, based off of what these linebackers are doing,
we can hand the ball off to Jeremiyah Love and hope that these linebackers are kind of shifting this way. You know, this is my favorite thing. The Cowboys got into this a little bit. You motion one way, you get everyone's eyes going, and then you kind of hit like a counter run on the backside of that, right? So I think that's this is still an RPO read, though, and you're really going to like where this is going. So, again, tight end is motioning across the formation. Option one, hand it off. Let's say first time they hand it off. Okay, second time they come back to this, boom. They fake the handoff. And here's where it gets really cool, in my opinion. You want this 2 wide receiver to kind of clear everything out. The second wide receiver, the field wide receiver, can kind of come back on this screen. And then here's where it gets really cool. This tight end can continue going into motion, and he's going to hit kind of in this underneath flat area right now. So right now you have 2 choices. You can hit the screen, you can hit the flat, or you can hit the streak. And then I think the thing that would really be awesome here, you fake all of it, you get everyone's eyes going, and then you sneak Jeremiyah Love into a running back screen kind of on this backside here. Everything's showing you're faking the handoff. Everyone's eyes are going to this tunnel screen or the tight end going in motion, leaking out to the flat. You open up, you look that way, you fake the screen, and then you hit Jeremiyah Love on the backside. This is how RPO can kind of play. And again, you have so many options off of it.
Yeah, just a little bit of simple motion. And to your point about, then linking Jeremiyah Love out to that opposite flat, or screen, or however you want to set it up. The guy you initially do the play fake to is typically the best guy to end up throwing the ball to, because you fake it to him first. And then, like you said, now you've got all this eye candy going the other direction. You slip him out. And even though he's Jeremiyah Love, because you've got all this action going the opposite direction, you've got really good odds that worst case scenario, he's sitting in a one-on-one situation, and all he's got to do is make one man miss. And
likely a linebacker.
You're right. And then it's, as Jeremiyah Love said, track meet after that. So, all right, we'll take a timeout. When we come back, we've got more on the whiteboard, taking a look at Notre Dame's offense today. We will do that when we return. Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com continues. We've got a little bit of time left in this first hour of the show. We're doing some whiteboard, looking at Notre Dame's offense and some ways that Notre Dame can navigate the Texas A&M defense Saturday night with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. Okay, Jess, so we saw little bits and pieces there to begin with. What have you got for us next in terms of what Notre Dame's RPO could look like, and getting Jeremiyah Love, Jadarian Price involved in the game?
Yeah, so there was a comment about, I think, 21 and 22 personnel in the chat. And usually I am the 21-22 personnel advocate, but I'm here to say I don't like the idea against Texas A&M, to be honest with you. If I had to put my money out there, I think we're going to see a heavy 11 personnel. And I think we're also going to see a lot of heavy 10 personnel. So 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 10 personnel, 1 running back, no tight end, just the rest are wide receivers. I think that Notre Dame, like I said, they need to spread this out, in my opinion. I think they need to get Texas A&M away from the box and then allow kind of Jadarian Price, Jeremiyah Love to do what they do best, in my opinion, and that's get the ball and just read the lanes and just kind of play backyard football to a degree. And that's a lot of what Jadarian Price did in his runs. And I think that Texas A&M, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they have good speed and athleticism. So I don't want to overload the box. And when I was watching the Utah State game, really the only time Texas A&M committed to 8 players in the box, definitely 8 players in the box, is when they either went 2 tight ends or 2 running backs. And sometimes they were out there in 22 personnel. And I think that just screams too much run. And so I don't love that for this specific opponent. Now, later on, maybe so, but they need to spread this thing out. And like I said, they need to displace the tight end. So I think a lot of what you're going to see is 10 and 11 personnel this weekend. I think is predominantly going to be 11 personnel. So that kind of will take me into my next kind of bit here. Got a fresh board, got some fresh ideas, some fresh concepts.
Here we go.
Let me go ahead and move one guy around. Actually, I want to move 2 people around here and here. Okay. So right now, ball is middle of the field. You have Notre Dame with 2 wide receivers split out to the left. You have a tight end as the end man on the line of scrimmage, almost kind of like an H-back. He's not on the line of scrimmage. He's just right behind the left tackle. Then you have the running back split out to the right, and then you have 1 wide receiver also split out kind of over by the numbers. So, this is a formation that Utah State did run. And here is really kind of how Miami lined up to it. And I will say, how Texas A&M lined up. I will say Texas A&M basically ran 2 high shell the entire game. That screams run the ball.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's probably because they didn't respect Utah State's running game. So
right, and that's not obviously going to be kind of quite the case in this game. So I want to move this one more player. I think that this guy would be a little bit kind of more down here, and this guy would kind of be back a little bit defensively. So kind of getting into what would work well for Notre Dame. Anytime there's a tight end on the field, and there is, and he's on the line of scrimmage or near the line of scrimmage, the running back is always going to be opposite. And the reason why he's going to be kind of opposite majority of the time is, and what I mean by opposite, he's not going to line up on the same side of the tight end, because that RPO motion or action has to go at the tight end, because again, of who you're reading and putting in a bind. You're basically putting a run fit and a pass fit on this outside linebacker at the same time. So he has to pick, one or the other, right? I think a lot of what you could get into or another RPO scheme that would look good here and being really effective in the run is I think on the snap of the ball, what you could do is like fold this tight end across the line of scrimmage. So he can either kind of plug in and it be some sort of power concept, or he can kind of fight all the way across the line of scrimmage. And this running back can hit almost like a counter power behind the tight end. But on both of these, RPO schemes, what you could say is, okay, you fake the handoff, and again, that tight end kind of leaks in behind the linebackers. And so I think that's going to be a lot of what you see this weekend when they're in 11 personnel is a tight end who is either folding into the run game, like inside, kind of more of like that power lead blocking type run. And if they're not doing that, they're fitting in and kind of leaking in behind the linebackers. And so as soon as, CJ Carr fakes that handoff, he can now hit his big tight end. And I think that's what you're going to see more of this weekend is the tight end be more involved in the RPO game. Last week, we saw a lot of outside passes, like deep passes to the numbers, getting those like wide receivers involved. I think this week to kind of, make the reads a little bit easier and be more kind of game plan efficient. I think a lot of these RPO reads are going to go more so to Eli Raridan, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting.
Stymie,
real quick. Stymie in the YouTube chat saying Cassius Howell had success about Utah State's left tackle back-to-back sacks at one point. That doesn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy. It was actually one series, it was a 3 and out, and Cassius Howell, Texas A&M's defensive end, had 3 consecutive sacks. He had 3 sacks in as many plays to force a 3 and out against Utah State. So like you see that and you're like, oh boy, Anthony Knapp, what's going to happen here? Through 2 games, those are his only 3 sacks. Like that is all he's done basically. Like it was impressive. Anytime a guy, a defensive end gets 3 sacks on 3 straight plays, that's very impressive. Through 2 games though, those are his only sacks. And he didn't look, like Mr. Destructible, really before that, didn't look like that after that. He's got to be accounted for, obviously, but those are his only 3 sacks through 3 games. They came in 3 consecutive plays. Anything, Jesse, real quick? We've got time for maybe one more short one if you've got something.
Yeah, so this is what I'm waiting for CJ Carr to really do in the RPO game. And everyone's going to hate me, but whatever. These are my favorite passes that Dak throws because it takes some courage.
Oh, boy, here we go.
To throw some of these passes. But when you hit it, you're going to hit it. So, again, what are we doing? We're reading this linebacker that's displaced between the end man of line of scrimmage and the first wide receiver, right? So, on the snap of the ball, here's Jeremiyah Love, Jadarian Price. We're hitting that mesh point. The far side wide receiver, so this guy will be 2, this guy will be 1. So the guy closest to the numbers, the 1 wide receiver, he's going to kind of take a step back and look like he's running some sort of tunnel screen. What I want the 2 wide receiver to do is kind of clear out the flat a little bit and work on the eyes of this linebacker. So he's going to sit down right in this kind of area. So
little curl to the inside there.
Curl to the inside. And right now, this linebacker's got a hard choice because this guy is running a curl, and he's also got the freaking running back running, so some sort of RPO look here. So he's got to run in a pass fit, and he's got to decide right now what's going on, right? So let's say that CJ Carr pulls this ball. I want this tight end to act like he's blocking. He's going to chip off, and he's going to release up the seam. So how this play works is you fake the handoff. Immediately, your eyes go to this linebacker. He's going to sit on this curl route, and as he's sitting on the curl route, this tight end is kind of sneaking by him up the seam, and about 5 to 7 yards down the field before this safety can step up on big Eli Raridan, CJ Carr just throws it now. Quick bullet up the seam, 7 yards to the tight end. I think this play is going to be there. They have to let CJ Carr work the middle of the field, especially in the RPO game, because the whole point is you're sucking everyone in. And so as you're sucking them in, you release the tight end down the seam, boom, you hit him. Maybe he trucks the safety, maybe he makes the safety miss, and again he's off to the races again.
Yeah, I mean, you say they have to let CJ Carr throw to the middle of the field. I think that is one of the questions. Do they let CJ Carr throw to the middle of the field? How comfortable are they at this point letting him do that? Coming out of you're not that far removed from training camp. Basically.
We were just talking about the Texas A&M defensive end. This is again why I think you're going to see so much 11 personnel with the tight end on the line of scrimmage. They're going to help. Both these guys are going to come off double team. Raritan's going to chip him in the RPO games. If it's a run, he's going to stay on him and work on sealing this linebacker. If it's pass, he's going to chip, give Anthony Knapp some help, and then he's going to release out for a pass. That's how you help against some of these edge rushers that Notre Dame is getting ready to go against, knowing the lessons that you learned against Miami's premier edge rushers.
Real quick, Facilitate from the YouTube chat asks if you have actually seen the team play out any of your whiteboard ideas.
Yeah, that's happened before. I usually text you when that happens.
Yes, I know. I can't remember specifics, but
it comes up. And I feel like
it's these concepts that we've talked about with this, that we've seen them, actually use in games. So yes,
and that's the thing is when you do this, it's as an offensive coordinator, there's so many different ways you could draw up a play, but you're kind of looking for the overarching concept, right? And for me, I guess the take-home message would be a lot of 11 personnel. And in the RPO game, you're going to have that tight end kind of be the end man of the line of scrimmage. And then you're also going to displace the tight end to kind of create a more lighter box. But that's how Mike Denbrock schemes it up after that. I don't know exactly, but I think you're going to see a lot of 11 personnel, kind of what we were just showing.
All right. Good stuff as always. Whiteboard is back. Thursday, we'll have even more whiteboard, and we'll take a look at the defensive side of the ball for Notre Dame and the attention that will probably be paid to Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed. That'll be on Thursday's show.
In Concepcion.
Yes, Mr. Concepcion as well, their deep threat. We'll take a time out for the top of the hour. When we come back, it's rapid fire in hour number 2. It's hour number 2 of Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. Thanks for being with us here today. Along with Jesse Stiers, I'm Sean Stiers, and since it is hour number 2, Jess, you know what time it is? It's rapid fire time. There's a good question that I saw Scott L. Esquire bring up in the YouTube chat. Don't forget, you can watch us on YouTube, whether it's the Irish Breakdown channel or Sports Radio WSBT channel. He says, time for his first ever commercial break chat poll. He put this up in the chat. Should Notre Dame ever allow CJ Carr to run the ball on 3rd or 4th down with less than 6 inches to go? A, no, never. B, not unless hell froze over. C, absolutely not. What do you think?
So I think that they should if they go under center.
That's
anything else?
Go under center enough.
Yeah. Anything else? I don't mind the QB power and the QB counter, to be honest with you, as long as it's executed well. And that's the reason why the one blew up on them in that short down in Miami. There was one blown block. If that block wasn't blown, that he probably got 10, 15, and maybe even more than that. So I want to say situationally, but I have more confidence in Love and Price.
Oh, Scott said greater than 6 inches, by the way. So, okay.
Oh, greater than 6 inches.
Yeah.
I mean, he did score a touchdown on that QB power in the goal line. It's there. I don't mind it. Just it's not like Riley Leonard. Can't take the shots, not as fast, not as athletic.
I don't get the whole narrative that Carr is somehow more frail than Riley Leonard. Like, I've stood next to both of them. Riley Leonard is built, I mean, he's a little bit taller, but he's built like a freaking basketball player. You know,
it wasn't thick, like, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's just because he's like Gumby. He's so durable. You know, you can bend him, you can twist him, you can do all this stuff to Riley Leonard, but you can't break him unless it's his foot, unfortunately. But, you know, fortunately, that didn't ever happen last season. But yeah, I got dyslexic. I got it. Everybody that was greater than and not less than. My bad. I just really don't want him to. Like, I would rather hand the ball to Jeremiyah Love, but I'm also not saying never have CJ Carr run the ball. There are times for it, you know, when you can catch a team off guard, which is kind of what they did with some of that stuff against Miami.
I'm not opposed to it. If it's limited to maybe 5 times a game, 4 or 5 times, again, it's situationally. I'm not in this camp that he shouldn't run the ball. He's athletic. Right. It was proven effective against Miami. And if you can lull a defense to sleep, kind of doing one look, and that, I mean, we just did a whole segment on the RPO, and I can't believe I completely left it out of it. But that's the third option is CJ Carr keeping the ball himself and running it. And so every now and then, you're going to lull the defense to sleep, and you don't have to be the most athletic guy in the field when no one's there and there's a ton of open space. So not opposed to it.
I just didn't like the 3rd and 1. That was the only one I really objected to in the Miami game when Jeremiyah Love's on the field. Just hand him the ball and let him get that tough yard for you is kind of where I am on that. Notre Dame, Texas A&M, by the way, this Saturday night, kickoff is at 7:30. Sports Radio WSBT, Sunny 101.5, the home of Notre Dame football and the Notre Dame Radio Network, the Odyssey app as well, AUDACY. Game day coverage starts at 3 o'clock Eastern time this weekend. Tim Grell, Jim Irizarry, Eric Hansen, Tyler Horka, they'll be on for 3.5 hours prior to the game, prior to every game this season, but they will start at 3 o'clock Eastern time this week. They always have guests as well. Former 1988 national championship players Frank Stams and Brian Flannery among the guests for this week's show. So tune in, the all-new revamped game day show, 3 o'clock Eastern time right here on Sports Radio WSBT, Sports Radio WSBT app, and live on the Sports Radio WSBT YouTube channel as well. All right, let's get into some questions that we've got lined up. We've got a couple of comments from Marcus Freeman we didn't get into on yesterday's show pertaining to the defense, starting with tackling issues against the Miami Hurricanes.
I mean, most of our missed tackles probably weren't in space. They were more in the box, and the ability to make sure we're driving our feet, we're wrapping up. you don't want to make excuses in his first game, miss tackles, but we got to attack him in practice. And so we can't go live tackling, just for the safety of our team. But we have to be intentional about finding ways to tackle different equipment, maybe even people to the ground defensively. And that was something that we really we were intentional about last week. And then when you thud, you got to thud, right? And thud means you stop the ball carrier's feet. That doesn't mean take it to the ground, but you got to stop their momentum before you let them go. And that's something we had to make sure we do in practice.
Tackling some different equipment. In general, Jess, would you expect your first game to be the worst game when it comes to tackling issues and that kind of thing?
Yeah, and I'm not going to – this is going to come off, I think, that I'm up here kind of making excuses. But from a defensive mindset or perspective, like Marcus Freeman was kind of alluding to in practice throughout entire camp and game week, you're not full on just taking people to the ground, full on tackling, trying to blow each other up like you would in game speed. Like, you have to think long term here. The days of just hammering your bodies into each other at practice and all that, it's just not a thing anymore. There's a lot of, shoulder pads and helmet practices. There's really not a lot of full pad practices anymore. And so, it's one thing to wrap a guy up and thud him like he was talking about, but I don't know about you. There's a difference between taking a full-grown man to the ground in the trenches than thudding him up. And so until you do that in a live situation, especially kind of being off the amount of time that Notre Dame was, it can lend to, likely seeing these sort of errors at the beginning of the season.
Well, the odd thing to me is what he talked about, that it wasn't missing tackles in space. It was more in the box. And that's what, those should be the easier tackles to make, because you're not just one-on-one against a guy and, trying to read his hips and stuff like that. It's like you're in closer quarters. So those should be the one you really shouldn't be missing those kind of tackles. You're just arm tackling and doing some of that kind of stuff. But again, if you're not doing a ton of it live, and there's only so much that you can do because you don't want your players getting hurt, and it's not like NFL where you're playing preseason games and you have no choice but to go full out and make tackles, even though starters don't always play, obviously, or they play minimally in those kind of games. But it's just I feel like they always talk about game 1 to game 2 is the biggest step up. And I feel like game 1 to game 2 in terms of tackling should also be the biggest step up. And I think that there was definitely much more unknown in terms of what the Carson Beck, sort of offense was going to look like, and some of those kind of things. Whereas now Texas A&M has 2 game films that you can watch and kind of see what they're going to do. So I feel like it should be a lot different. And if it's not, again, then we're talking about big issues. If it's not considerably better against the Aggies Saturday.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And not to sound cliche, but I mean, the box is going to win this game offensively and defensively. Notre Dame needs to control the box and run the ball better. And then defensively, they need to tackle and not get pushed around as much in the box. And that's, again, in my opinion, what it's going to come down to.
The Irish forced 0 turnovers against the Hurricanes. They lost the turnover margin in the loss to Miami. Freeman talked about working on creating turnovers. How you do that?
I think part is being intentional about trying to disrupt the ball, take the ball away, and that was something they did a good job of having ball security. The other part is we got to go make plays, and balls in the air. A ball's not coming to you, you got to go get it. And so when we really worked on trying to high point the ball, going to get it, not letting it come down to you, right? Being aggressive at getting the ball at its highest point. And so, again, turnovers usually come in high numbers, right? But we just got to keep working it. And I'm sure before we know it, we'll get some.
All right, so there was a specific reference in there. What do you think about just creating more turnovers, getting it done?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that alluded to Adon Shuler not going up and getting the ball and just kind of expecting it to fall there. But, to me, turnovers are, you kind of break it down into two categories, really, or three. You have kind of accidents, like just bad plays where you really didn't do anything. Maybe the quarterback just made the wrong read. I don't know. Just accidents, like whoopsies, you know what I mean? Like a fumbled snap or something like that. But to me,
unforced error kind of.
Yeah, unforced error. Perfect way to describe it. To me, creating turnovers really comes down to two things. Creating pressure, because that can lead to sacks and strip sacks and blow up plays in the backfield, that sort of stuff. And then bad throws that come off of created pressure, right? Like the quarterback is maybe getting hit and as he's throwing the ball, and that leads to an errant throw and a turnover. But the other side of it is just playing good defense. Good coverage, disguising coverage, rolling in coverage, like doing stuff pre to post snap that forces a quarterback to, create a turnover. And then to me, and this is what Al Golden was really good at and what came up over the weekend when his team, his defense took on the Cleveland Browns, they had 2 interceptions by just being around the ball, rallying to the ball, being around the ball. So if there's a deflection, the next guy is catching that ball in the air. And that's something that he deliberately practices, tip drills or guys batting a ball and another guy kind of diving to make the interception. But that comes with playing just good defense, everyone rallying to the ball, playing with a lot of energy and effort and that sort of thing. And so to me, that's how you create turnovers is that kind of good defense and creating pressures. The accidents or the unforced errors, like anyone can do those. We're talking about how a good defense can create turnovers.
Yeah, and I think just being generally aggressive. Bobby O'Shea in the YouTube chat says, working on it, and working on it. And, what Marcus Freeman was talking about, we all know that Adon Schuler was just too passive on that play. Like, flashback to a year ago, remember in the opener against Texas A&M when he was Johnny on the spot, like he was around the ball all the time. And I think that is such a big part of it, being around the ball, just rallying to the ball, those things that you're talking about. But it's also the difference in coordinators. Like, how much is that driven home with this current coordinator? We don't know exactly yet, like how much they were obviously a lot more passive. I do wonder though, because of the amount of zone, not just like you're playing, like you don't intend to play passive football, but it just felt like there was so much more thinking involved on the Notre Dame defense's part last Sunday night, or I guess two Sundays ago now against Miami. But you also saw more of that thinking early on in Al Golden's tenure, right? Like as you're transitioning from one defensive coordinator to another.
Yeah, and I think that's what is, to me, kind of the biggest question mark going into this game is, are we going to see some of those pillars or standards that Al Golden set not show up for a second week? Because that's the thing that I think that we feared the most with Chris Ash taking over the defense this offseason is obviously you wanted him to continue everything that Al Golden was doing really well. How realistic that is, I don't know, but you would think that something like, rallying to the ball, playing with the extreme effort, those sort of things are more detrimental, in my opinion.
We'll touch on this more on Thursday's show when you're back, but Marcus Freeman did talk at his press conference about and I've brought this up a couple of times before as well. Marcus Freeman's first game, remember in 2021, was at Florida State, a game that went to overtime. And do you remember the big explosive plays that Florida State made, both in the running game and the passing game?
He worked as a first-time defensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's right. And he made adjustments.
So did Al Golden.
Yeah, he made adjustments as the season went on, figuring out what he needed to do more of, what they needed to do less of. So again, I'm not going to judge Chris Ash by one game. It was very disappointing, that one game, but there are different concepts at play here, just like there were, let's not have complete revisionist history and say that everyone was a love fest with Al Golden from day one, because there were plenty of people who wanted to see Al Golden shown the door after that first season was over. things turned out a lot differently after that. Now, we don't want a whole season of grace period for Chris Ash in this instance because this roster is so good, but there's still got to be, a little bit of breaking in period. I know it's hard to be patient. None of us want to have to, sift through some of the growing pains and stuff like that, but there were bound to be some. And the good thing is there were some in what turned out to be a close game. The bad thing is if you make a couple more plays, like if Don Schuler goes up and high points that ball and at the very least comes up with the PBU, might very well be talking about a very different outcome today. Need to see more.
Go through.
Need to see more aggressiveness. That's the bottom line. More aggressiveness from the defense because the defense is built on aggressiveness. That's what I'm saying. We'll take a timeout. When we come back, more rapid fire. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. It's Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. A rapid fire continues with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. Late breaking news, Jesse. I've just received word from the one and only Tim Grau. Game Day's new home game location is the Linebacker this season. So they will be broadcasting beginning at 3 o'clock from the Linebacker this Saturday, leading into Texas A&M.
That is going to be electric.
Good luck with that.
That's going to be a lot of people.
Yes.
A lot of yelling.
Yes. Will there be shots? Will there be car bombs? What exactly is that going to look like? That's what I want to know.
Are they going to be able to make it from the Linebacker to the stadium?
That's right. That's right. Be a lot of trouble over there. Okay, so after the Miami game, Marcus Freeman said something to the extent of they played hard, but they didn't play hard long enough against the Hurricanes, and that came up at Monday's press conference here.
I always say the team that plays harder longer usually is the one that's successful. You really look at the last drive of the game, and defensively and offensively, we couldn't get the stop defensively that we needed. We let them into field goal range. There was a couple of times where, they were displacing some of our guys, were missing tackles. It's not a lack of effort, right? It's just a lack of execution, but also credit to them in terms of those guys played extremely hard and they finished the game better than we did. And, even when we get the ball on offense, we get, the sack or intentional grounding, and the last play is a sack. And at the end of the day, like those crucial moments, you got to play harder but execute at the same time.
All right, play harder longer, execute at the same time. Let me ask you this, Jess. I mean, lack of fire, lack of emotion was something that a lot of people came out of that, game with a big observation of Notre Dame. Do you think there could have been any complacency on Notre Dame's part?
No, I don't think there was any.
No,
I don't think there was.
Go to the
any
national championship game next year, and it's like, we've been here. This is our field, that kind of stuff. Same field they beat Penn State last year in the semifinals.
I'm just not buying into it because of, that all offseason we've seen those shirts that say SAS on it. Still ain't. You can fill in the rest. So I think that Notre Dame had more so of a chip on their shoulder going into this season because of the unfinished business. And I just believe under Marcus Freeman, that's just not the mindset that was created in camp and going into game week. I think this more or less boiled down to, what Marcus Freeman said first and foremost was cliche. Yes, you want to play harder longer. Like that's the name of the game, right? Like,
yes,
of course. But, when he started getting into the more of the specifics, that's when he kind of got out of those cliche waters of, missing tackles, missing assignments when they were on offense. And to me, what this boils down to is how do you perform under complete exhaustion? You're going to hit that stage. And again, this is the first game of the season on the road in rainy, muggy conditions. A lot of these guys still have to get their legs underneath them. It's such thing, and you hear it in the NFL too, of getting into game shape.
Yeah, but don't Miami guys do too?
No,
right?
And that's where I'm giving them compliment is they performed harder or they played harder under complete exhaustion. Notre Dame guys just like we've all been to that point during a workout or maybe even in a game, you're completely exhausted. And that's when you have to dial in and kind of either go harder. And that's where Notre Dame just kind of fell, in my opinion, or kind of succumbed to Miami is their guys executed at a higher level under complete exhaustion. And that was the difference in the game.
TD4ND says it's a young team figuring out leadership, maybe to an extent. I mean, you don't have a veteran quarterback, obviously, like Riley Leonard, so you are, and you do have a whole new set of captains and all that kind of stuff. Again, like I don't associate the level to which the captains did or didn't play, to like any impact on the game, but you do have to sort of figure out as the game is going on, okay, who's who's our North Star? Like who are we following in this? And like you found out as the game went on that young CJ Carr was a guy that you can get behind, but you don't want to put yourself in that situation, obviously, where you have to put him in that situation where you do have to come back and like they did seem to be off just in terms of like an eternal flame, like having that fire within them from start to finish. It did seem to be much more intermittent than what we've seen before on both sides of the ball. They were just not an attacking team that we've become accustomed to seeing from Notre Dame teams the last couple of years, especially last year. Jesse is shaking his head.
I've made my points.
Yeah, see, Riley says he thinks it's overconfidence from the success of last season. And I don't completely discount that, because again, that was part of what I said, like, okay, you just went to the national championship game last season. You won on this same field. Who's Miami? You weren't in the playoffs last year, all that kind of stuff. I could see some of that, where maybe you kind of overlooked them a little bit. Sportsman Philly 22 just got here. He says, where is the magic whiteboard in the YouTube chat? You will have to go back, Sportsman Philly, and watch earlier in the show. We did have some whiteboard earlier. Jesse broke out the whiteboard.
It was like 5:30 to 6:05-ish, 6:10-ish.
Yeah, good 30 minutes or so. We'll have more defensive whiteboard coming up on Thursday's show, so you can go back and watch the whiteboard.
I'm getting a little frustrated because people are talking about leaders don't let their team be overconfident. You're talking about overconfidence, all this stuff. I just think, again, I keep coming back to this, circling back to, like, this were two talented teams, and I feel like Miami just came out with a little bit more juice. They were a little bit more of the hammer than the nail at the end of the game. That doesn't mean Notre Dame didn't give Miami the hammer at some points. It's just at certain points in the game, Miami had more juice. I think that
there was intermittent hammering.
And it was Miami's home turf. They feel like they have a lot to prove. They're a completely rebuilt team on both sides of the ball. Like, they're playing the defending, Notre Dame, already a national brand that's coming off a national, like, Notre Dame's at the pinnacle. They just played a national championship. Miami had a lot to prove in that game. And I think naturally, kind of being the underdog, being at home, being this revamped team, they just had a little bit more juice, a little bit more pop. Again, they were more of the hammer. I think we're drawing a little bit too much of conclusions after one game against a really talented team.
All right. Okay.
And I just had to let that out. I was getting a little frustrated.
It's fine. I'm glad you got that out there. Got it all out of your system now?
Yes.
That's all right. Okay, we're going to run out of time here at some point. We've still got a little bit of time. I've got to take another break. So I'm gonna go ahead and go with this one. And then we've got some other stuff we're going to get to, including last night's Chicago Bears game. But things got a little bit chippy between former NFL defensive back Ryan Clark and Peter Schrager recently on ESPN. They were debating the games that Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown and Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb had in last Thursday night's Eagles-Cowboys game. Dan Orlovsky was part of the debate as well. I'll play you the clip, and then we'll talk about it.
Are you feeling okay? You look at A.J. Brown, which is this number one wide receiver who got one target all night, and then you got CeeDee Lamb. But that's the when was the one target? That's the target. But though. I'm saying when was the one target? I'm saying you could have it both ways. 54 seconds left in the game on 2nd and 11. It was the one target. He runs the out route. You wake up this morning and say A.J. Brown had a better day than CeeDee Lamb. But you know what you wake up saying though? A.J. Brown's team is 1-0. Of course, right? Like that's what I get it. But the thing is this though, and. We shouldn't do this on TV, and so I apologize if people think this is rude. That's the non-player. Oh, stop! CeeDee Lamb is. Let me tell you why. I'm not looking at fantasy football, Ryan. I'm not. Don't belittle me like that. I could come in and say, as 3X players are saying one thing, and give an alternative perspective that maybe CeeDee Lamb did play well. And Peter, what I need for you to do is not get mad and let me finish for one. Okay, go on. It wasn't about you. It was going to be about me. Okay. As a player, I can't speak for CeeDee Lamb.
Okay, so there's Ryan Clark there at the end and going at Peter Schrager, and Peter Schrager firing back. Clark playing the I played and you didn't card is blank.
It's just it's downright disgraceful in my opinion. It's stubborn, and really it's just unacceptable. And it's funny because after kind of watching it, hearing, reading different people talk about it, I saw this one guy that said an ex-player once confessed to him, like, if I ever pull that card out, that means you basically checkmate me. I have nothing else to beat you.
You're pinned and you're feeling defensive and you don't have an argument, so you feel like that's where you've got to go to.
Right. And it's just really unfortunate because, a majority of Ryan Clark and what he does and what he contributes, I'm buying, but like this sort of stuff, I'm obviously really selling, and it's unfortunate because it puts a distaste in people's mouths of Ryan Clark when I think, again, majority of the time what he is selling is really good. So I don't know. It's just not a good look because it's obvious you can know about something just because you didn't play it, like
right. Exactly.
Some of the best minds, coaches, they've never played before, and like Schrager said, there's nothing wrong with giving that different perspective or outlook as someone who didn't play, who's thinking about it kind of a different tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby O'Shea makes a great point. How many, do you know how many great coaches didn't play in the NFL? I mean, Charlie Weiss was a great offensive mind. He was the offensive coordinator for Super Bowl champions. Bill Belichick was not a great player himself. You can go on down the list. There are plenty. But this is on brand for Ryan Clark. And for the people, some might not know who Peter Schrager is. He was on Good Morning Football on the NFL Network for a long time, did some Fox Sports stuff as well. But this is a guy I started watching. I've never really been a get-up watcher. I've watched more after Schrager went to ESPN a few years back, but he's not a hot take machine. And that is unfortunately so much of what ESPN has become. And, it feels like Ryan Clark, is like digging in and he wants to be that Stephen A. Smith guy. But that's just like, if you have to fall back on, I was a player and you weren't, then you're never going to be Stephen A. Smith, regardless of what you think of Stephen A. Smith, but like Schrager picked exact Super Bowl matchups. I think it was like 4 or 5 years in a row before the seasons started. He would pick, like every season before the season would start, he would pick who was going to be in the Super Bowl until last year. And guess what? Those guys both made picks going into last weekend, and Schrager's picks were better than Clark's picks, So, like, not everyone played in the NFL, and you're still allowed to have an opinion on the NFL, regardless of whether you played in the NFL or whatever sport it happens to be that you're talking about. Like Clark was a run-of-the-mill average NFL player. He was pretty good. He played for a Super Bowl champion. He made one Pro Bowl, but he's pretty much a rank and file guy. And so, like, if you're going to go, based on this, what Clark is saying, like, as a rank and file guy, does that mean if a Hall of Famer has an opinion different than his, like, does Ryan Clark need to cede, to the Hall of Famer? Like if he and Tom Brady are going back and forth on something, is Brady automatically right just because he's the Hall of Famer and Clark isn't? There are a lot of different pecking orders to this, not just I played or I didn't play, but it's just a bad look on Clark's part. Anytime a guy has to fall back on this, it's just like you said, it's checkmate. Like he was cornered and he didn't have any place to go, so he fell back on, well, I was a player, and
and he couldn't just swallow the ego and say you're right.
Yeah. Because again, like if you listen to the merits of the argument, because they're going back and forth about Lamb and AJ Brown, and Schrager's point was, AJ Brown had minimal targets and 1 catch all game, whereas CD Lamb had a couple of drops, but he had 7 catches and however many yards that he had. So like Clark's whole thing was, well, the Eagles won. So, well, what does that have to do with the kind of game that an individual player had? There were plenty, like Lamar Jackson still had a great game against the Bills the other night, but his team happened to lose by a point. All right, we'll take our final timeout. Back to wrap things up with rapid fire. Got a little Sharon Moore. Got a little college hot seat. Got a little Chicago Bears as well. It's all coming up when we continue with Rapid Fire and Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Winding down Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com and Rapid Fire with Jesse Stiers, Sean Stiers. Fill in the blank. The Bears giving up 21 unanswered points to lose to the Vikings in J.J. McCarthy's debut Monday Night Football is blank.
It's hilarious, and I'll give you a couple reasons why it's hilarious. Reason number one, and I think this is the first and foremost funny. My sister Bailey, huge Bears fan.
Yes.
I love nothing more than ruffling her feathers and telling her how bad the Bears are. So I literally last night, all I could think of is, wow, I can't wait to text her and say the Bears stink. and they blew it. And that was the best part is I know she was up watching it. She's committed. Yes. I know she was up watching it. I knew it was going to ruin her evening. And so that was number one, hilarious. And number two, I spit out something on Twitter. I can't remember if it was last night or this morning, but everyone was just riding freaking JJ McCarthy into the half and into the third quarter. First game as an NFL starter, coming off an injury, and then the man wins the game. Though he wins the game, and that's my whole point. Is I just think it was hilarious to laugh at these people who were just dogging on him, and it's like, yes, he's playing bad, but that's not drawing a whole conclusion to the whole season, or and in this case, not even the rest of the game. And so the man figured out, and they won. And he did it against Caleb Williams, a guy who just can't seem to himself figure it out. And I'm going to give him more time because it was game one with Ben Johnson. But, man, he keeps making the same errors. And it's just kind of comical at this point.
And that's the thing with him. I just, things that you hear about Caleb Williams is he just falls back trying to get by on talent alone. Like how much work is he actually putting in? Because you've heard some of those kind of critiques of him. But the way the game started off, the Bears drive down, get the touchdown. Caleb Williams is looking great, and they drove a few more times and then would stall and nothing would come out of it. And in the meantime, J.J. McCarthy just looked bad, so bad. And I went to bed. It wasn't at halftime. I think I watched a drive or two in the second half, and it's just like this Vikings offense is doing nothing. And then when I wake up this morning and find out that the Vikings actually won, I went, what? How did that happen? Because the last thing I watched was the pick six that J.J. McCarthy threw, and it was awful. It was just awful. But they ended up winning, and then you watch all the highlights this morning, and I couldn't believe that that was the same quarterback that I saw, and even Caleb Williams was the same quarterback that I saw. Just night and day difference between how they, each of those guys finished the game when it was said and done. It's nuts. We've only got a little bit more than a minute here, so I don't know what more you want to try to talk about before we wrap things up. I think what I might do is just remind everybody that game day on this station begins at 3:00 Eastern time this Saturday, prior to the 7:30 kickoff between Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Tim Grau, Jim Irizarry, Eric Hansen, Tyler Horka, they'll be on for 3.5 hours. And for all home games this season, they're going to be broadcasting from the linebacker. So you can look forward to seeing them go in there, hang out at the linebacker. I don't know. I feel like they're taking their lives into their own hands by doing that. But they'll be out there at 3:00 until 6:30 this Saturday prior to the Notre Dame Texas A&M game. And, of course, you'll hear the broadcast here on Sports Radio, WSBT, Sunny 101.5, and on the Notre Dame Radio Network worldwide at the Odyssey app, AUDACY. Jesse, enjoyed it as always. Great debut of the Whiteboard. I will talk to you on Thursday, and we'll talk to everybody else tomorrow. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.
Deuces.